You cannot make men good by law. And without good men, you cannot have a good society. That's C.S. Lewis. If laws don't make men good, then what does? To figure this out, we will move from laws through ethics to heroes, guided by the thoughts and ideas of C.S. Lewis and Nassim Taleb. What is the good of drawing up, on paper, rules for social behavior, if we know that, in fact, our greed, cowardice, ill temper, and self-conceit are going to prevent us from keeping them? Everything we do with laws is fighting the symptoms of a bigger root cause. Laws try to keep the symptoms, like violence, cheating, etc., in check. But as long as we are not confronting our inside, we will keep doing those bad things. It is easy enough to remove the particular kinds of graft or bullying that go on under the present system. But as long as men are twisters or bullies, they will find some new way of carrying on the old game under the new system. Why are laws not functioning to make someone good? Because when we think about it, laws are external. They are prohibitions or like some rules to guide our social life, mostly also with others. They are not there to make a person good. They can try to keep some person in check, more or less. But as said before, persons will be still probably evil inside, and after some time they will still do some bad things. So laws are external. They cannot make a person good. C.S. Lewis has here a great analogy. What is the good of telling the ships how to steer so as to avoid collisions if, in fact, they are such crazy old tubs that they cannot be steered at all? So when laws are not helping to make a man good, or also inversing it to not fighting the root cause of, so to speak, evil inside humans, or not evil, but the bad things inside us, then we can probably now try to move to the internal area of ethics. The ethical is always more robust than the legal. Over time, it is the legal that should converge to the ethical, never the reverse. Hence, laws come and go, ethics stay. Ethics are the fundament of our moral system. But in our world, the problem is that we tend to substitute laws with ethics, or better to say, ethics with laws. And the problem with that is that laws are much more fragile and easier to manipulate than ethics are. Modernity has replaced ethics with legalese, and the law can be gained with a good lawyer. Ethics is touching the inside of us, right? It comes more from the inside. It is about what is the right thing to do, what is a good thing to do, on which moral standpoint we are standing, or talking about, or on which moral standpoint we are now doing this action. Ethics is more about to do something because we want to do it, voluntarily, instead of doing something because we have to do it. This comes more from law, right? Because we have to do that, even if this is a good thing, but we have to. Maybe we don't want to. But ethics is the point where we want to do, for example, a good act, to helping some grandpa on the street, because we want to. This is this comes more from the inside and not gets pressed on us from the outside. And now we talked about ethics, and ethics are more or less also just theories of moral behavior. But ethics gets really powerful when we apply them. So now we move to the personal. Almost all kind of people at all times have agreed, in theory, that human beings ought to be honest and kind and helpful to one another. But though it is natural to begin with all that, if our thinking of morality stops there, we might just as well not have thought at all. Unless we go on to the second thing, the tidying up inside each human being, we are only deceiving ourselves. When we apply the right kind of ethics, we can become heroes. Consider older societies, those societies that have survived. The main difference between us and them is the disappearance of a sense of heroism, a shift away from a certain respect and power for those who take downside risks for others. For heroism is the exact inverse of the agency problem. Someone elects to be the disadvantaged, risk his own life, or harm to himself, or, in milder forms, accepts to deprive himself of some benefits for the sake of others. For Nassim Taleb, a hero is someone who takes the risk or the downside risk from another person and puts this risk on him or herself. Just shortly, Nassim mentioned the agency problem, and I just want to explain that shortly to you, if you don't know it, that we're on the same page. The agency problem is when an agent transfers the downside to someone else and by himself or herself only keeps the upside. Consider a consultant, in our case here the agent, is hired by a company owner, in our case here the principal. The consultant gives some advice, makes some changes, gets his money and is out. The possible up or downside of his or her changes, this consultant will never witness. When now the changes totally fail, the business owner stands there with all the downside. The agent, in our case the consultant, has different interests than the principal, in our case the business owner. While the principal wants long-term success and wants to have the problem solved over the long term, the agent wants to make short-term money for him or herself. So now we can define the inverse hero. In our case, that is the agent who takes his or her own risk and puts this risk on another person. And here's now a story what a real hero can look like. And heroism is not just about riots and wars. An example of an inverse agency problem. As a child, I was most impressed with the story of a nanny who died in order to save a child from being hit by a car. I find nothing more honorable than accepting death in someone else's place. It feels like today that we mostly respect the upside. We respect success. We respect how much money I can make or how much power I can gain. Those are the things we came to respect. And it is not that in older societies, those societies didn't respect power or money. They, I think for sure, also did. But it was just a little different because they respected much more the downside. It was in many cases that the most powerful person in traditional societies was a person who was having the most downside risk from all. So the higher you were in the hierarchy, the more downside risk you had also, like to get killed or like to just fall down the hierarchy. In traditional societies, a person is only as respectable and as worthy as the downside he, or more, a lot more than expected, she, is willing to face for the sake of others. The most courageous or valorous occupy the highest rank in their society. Knights, generals, commanders. Even mafia dons accept such rank in the hierarchy makes them the most exposed to be wrecked by competitors and the most penalized by the authorities. The same applies to saints, those who abdicate, devote their lives to serve others, to help the weak, the deprived, and the dispossessed. In his book Antifragile, Nassim Taleb differentiates between 3 different kinds of ethical conduct regarding to risk-taking. When someone has no skin in the game, meaning that someone keeps the upsides of some decisions or action, but not the downside, because the downside is transferred to the other person, then this is a person with no skin in the game. Like a banker, for example, who advises someone to buy a company, gets a provision for the advice before, and then it turns out that the company was fake. The banker doesn't have any downside, just upside. Another example could be corporate executives, non-entrepreneurs, and editors, according to Taleb. When someone has skin in the game, the person faces personally both the up and downside. It's basically like, well, literally talking, skin in the game. We have our own skin in the game. Entrepreneurs have mostly skin in the game. When the company goes great, they profit. When the company goes bad, they lose. Another example could be writers. Because a writer is someone who also, when something goes great, they become, let's say, famous, so to speak, or they just make money from it. But when it goes bad, they also get nothing, right? They are totally exposed to the up and downside. When someone has his or her soul in the game, according to Nassim Taleb, someone takes the downside voluntarily for others. The nanny in his story, for example, sacrificed her own life for that of the child. And those people are what we call heroes. For example, entrepreneurs or innovators who sacrifice themselves for a greater cause, right? Who build some company for a greater cause for everybody. Persons who have soul in the game, sacrificing themselves, taking the downside from others, from one person, from many persons, doesn't matter, but just taking the downside from other people on themselves. Combining this now with law and ethics, the hero mindset is not born out of laws, but rather it is born out of the commitment one takes to live an ethical or moral life, where everything this person is doing reflects that morality or that ethical code, so to speak. So they tidying themselves up, not because they have to, but because they want to, or just because it's the right thing to do according to their ethical code. If you take risks and face your fate with dignity, there's nothing you can do that makes you small. If you don't take risks, there's nothing you can do that makes you grand. Nothing. To conclude now all of this, how can we make man good? How can we make even ourselves good? And the first step is always the realization that we have to make it by ourselves. It starts all with tidying up our inside self, based on probably some ethical or moral standards, right? Because it can only come from the inside. The external side will not help us. The external side will keep maybe our bad sides in check, more or less, but we still will have them if we don't clean them up from the inside. And this is all pretty difficult because we don't have in our modern times some coherent ethical or moral system. According to some moral philosopher named Alasdair MacIntyre, our whole morality is fragmented. In the last video about René Girard, we learned, like according to René Girard, that he sees the universal ethic of caring for the victim, which comes from Christianity, as some universal ethic. And I agree that this ethic is still in our lives, but it is also just a fragment from Christianity. Most of us don't follow the whole moral system from Christianity. Like many of us live with a fragmented system. I would even say most of us, like of ethics and morality. But even if we don't have a coherent moral system or not a coherent ethical code, I think still it's in our responsibility to learn about it, and also probably, like even more important, of course, to apply those things. Of course, we have many good examples probably in each one of our lives, which we want to imitate, which persons show good ethics. Here on this channel, we will look the next months on some different ethical systems, like the Homeric ethics, Stoic ethics, Aristotelian ethics, Kantian ethics, like whatever. Like I try to cover many different ethical or moral systems, just that we get more aware of what was there, or what is like maybe unconsciously still there, like fragmented there, and what can we take also for ourselves to live a more ethical and moral life. And by all of this, right? Because what is the point of living an ethical and moral life? We build our character, right? We get stronger, we build our character, we know we have a code to follow. And I think this, not just me, like I think according to also C.S. Lewis and also to Nassim Nicholas Taleb, we live a more honorable life. And isn't that what we all maybe secretly want? Even if this is now not so much talked about, to live an ethical or honorable life, right? Like it's all about money and power. But I think deep down, many of us think there's something more behind those things, right? And maybe this is this honorable life. The first video about ethical codes and moral system will be the ideal of chivalry, which you can find here, all based on C.S. Lewis, which is a really great starting point to think about ethics and also morality. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and as always, I wish you a great day.